Halo, a name many of us are likely familiar with, known as an iconic sci-fi shooter revolving around a galactic war between the UNSC, a futuristic military arm of humanity, the Covenant, a fanatical collection of alien species, the Flood, and more. But the development of this franchise, the people who helped create it, and the choices they made, may not be as well known. It is my belief that Bungie and the evolution of the games and books merits a closer look. In this mini-series, we'll be examining aspects that help set the franchise apart from others, along with where the franchise is today. The time span encompasses well over 2 decades. So join me as we unravel the mysteries, celebrate the triumphs, and gain a deeper appreciation for the cultural phenomenon that is Halo. In 1997, 6 years after the company's founding, Bungie had officially produced 9 separate titles, all released on PC, featuring games in their Marathon and Myth series. Still a relatively small company, they had acquired enough employees to assign multiple teams to work on different projects. That meant, in late that year, they could continue working on their next major upcoming release, Myth 2, and still set aside a handful of people to work on something different. That something different was a real-time strategy game, initially dubbed Armor. Inside a somewhat humble, small studio in Chicago, development began on this new project. Right off the bat, the team knew they wanted to create a sci-fi game. As I mentioned, Armor was the original name for the project, but eventually, the team started calling it Monkey Nuts. The project lead, Jason Jones, decided that wasn't going to fly. Quote, he didn't want to tell his mother he was working on a game called Monkey Nuts, end quote. Next, they tried something that they could relate to, Blam. Supposedly, they received this idea thanks to all the car crashes that happened outside their studio on the street below. In any case, this name stuck, and the first websites were created for the project in March of 1998. On top of that, Blam became the official name of the game engine, further cementing it as part of the project. More and more work was compiled to form a semblance of what the game would actually be. By the middle of 1998, the increased fervor of development has swelled the team to around 8 or 9 people. These people would form the core team, many of whom, although they didn't know it at the time, will continue working on the franchise for many years to come. This team included Jason Jones, Marcus Lato, Jamie Griesmer, Joseph Staten, Paul Russell, Robert McLeese and his wife Lorraine, Shikai Wang, and Martin O'Donnell. Each one of these team members, among others, deserves more attention, but for now, try to keep these names in the back of your mind when we reference the core team. They formed the backbone of the project, and their decisions set the stage for much of what was to come. The project had started, as I had mentioned, as a real-time strategy, but in late 1998, the development team were murmuring about the direction of the game, and so they decided it would be more fitting if it were a third-person shooter. This decision was made due to the fact that during this time of development, the push to test and establish the correct feel of the game was still being worked out. At around this same time, not directly related to this project, but more so on Bungie as a whole, following the company's release of Myth 2 on November 30th, 1998, a major bug was discovered in Japan. The bug was that uninstalling the game on the Asian translation, copies of the disc might lead to other content in the user's hard drive also being uninstalled. After some testing, Bungie concluded that although the bug was unlikely to be easily replicated on a mass scale, it would cause serious issues for anyone who encountered it. This caused a conundrum for Bungie. They were left with 2 options, the first being to say nothing and fix the bug in a patch made available for download on their website, and the other was to publicly announce the problem and recall the game. Jason Jones, who as I mentioned was the project lead, but also the co-founder of Bungie, opted for the latter. To say that this was laudable is an understatement, as it calls into question whether most companies today, or even then, would do the same. This decision saw over 200,000 copies recalled, and a loss of roughly $800,000. Overall, the game was received well by most major game critics, with scores ranging from 8.5 to 9 out of 10, and many copies were sold. But as a result of the bug and the subsequent recall, it was not a major financial success. With all of this in the backdrop, Bungie was under some financial pressure and entered the year in 1999 eager to get back on the right track. Unfortunately for Martin O'Donnell, the Blam team's composer, the year began with a disaster. Marty was currently running a business called Total Audio and was being contracted by Bungie to work on the project. He, like Bungie, was situated in Chicago, making it easy for the two to collaborate. However, on January 13th, his company office burned down. Although it was not made clear to the public what the cause was, Marty sometime after was quoted jokingly saying, "I still wonder if Mike had something to do with it." This was in reference to Michael Salvatore, the co-founder of Total Audio, and a man who would also contribute to the project. After the fire, Marty actually became a full-time employee for Bungie, in no small part because of pressure from the two co-founders, Alex Seropian and Jason Jones. With the development of the project gaining serious momentum by 1999, Peter Tamte, Joseph Staten, and Jason Jones, all working on the project, went to go and meet with Steve Jobs himself at the Apple HQ. Their goal was to sway Jobs to allow them to present their upcoming title at that year's Macworld conference. Remember, the games Bungie produced up till then were all for Mac or Windows. After some cajoling, the pitch sold, and on July 21st, Jason Jones would present to the world the first iteration of the game. Prior to the event, Bungie released footage of the game to a select group of press. These screenshots were some of the first ever released. The game internally had yet again acquired a new name as well. Paul Russell, a member of the core team and an environmental artist, had created a new title, and with stylistic help from another core member and artist, Lorraine McLeese, the project would henceforth and forever be known as Halo. This name change occurred due to the environment the player would find themselves in, aboard a massive ring orbiting a gas giant somewhere in the Milky Way. Paul not only became the father of Halo, but also helped to establish one of the alien factions within Halo, the Forerunners, and their architectural style, characterizing it with sharp edges, gray and blue tones, and integrating their structures to seamlessly fit within the environment. His work on the Forerunners specifically would largely define their aesthetic for all future Halo titles. As I had mentioned, Halo was to be shown to the world at the Expo in July, but due to a technical issue with the newly created version of the Mac and a conflict with an API called OpenGL, it was discovered just days before that there was going to be no sound for the demo presented. Martin O'Donnell, tasked by Joseph Staten the Saturday before the event, had to create a soundtrack burned onto a CD to be run in conjunction with gameplay. The suggestive words given by Staten to Marty to influence the sound were, quote, "ancient, epic, mysterious," end quote. Marty took to task, and by that Monday, just 2 days later, he had something. Little did he know, this something would not only make it into the final version of the game, but go on to become some of the most iconic music in gaming history. With all bases covered, Jason Jones presented at Macworld the first visuals for the Future Soldier, as it was known then, along with massive terrain and eclectic life. It went off without a hitch, and following the presentation of the game, hype immediately began to swell. The initial tagline given by Bungie for the game gave the public an idea of what lay ahead. The details, although sparse, were rich enough that the press wrote several news articles indicating their eagerness to play. Bungie did not fail to take the initiative to capitalize on this hype, and announced on August 13th they would work with Take-Two Interactive, owner of Rockstar Games, to publish future titles on console. This was cause for concern for some, as the now newly announced Halo may not arrive on Mac and Windows. However, more announcements were made that Halo would be on consoles and PC. In a quote from an interview with Marty O'Donnell and Jamie Griesmer in 2015, reflecting on their time working on Halo, the game was going to be, quote, "a seamless world without levels or loading screens, open terrain, fauna, flora, weather, celestial events, and more." Ultimately, many of these features would be cut for various reasons, but the large expansive levels and seamless transitions from indoor to outdoor environments, considered revolutionary at the time, would remain in the final release, end quote. As for the time after the Macworld conference, details become a bit more sparse to come by, and thus development would continue quietly for the rest of 1999. In January of 2000, Take-Two invited Bungie to meet with Microsoft, in hopes of alleviating some of Bungie's financial troubles, which had still been plaguing them. The talks between the three companies continued for the next 6 months, and during that interim, the team working on Halo continued to experiment with design and direction. At E3 in May, the public witnessed what they had cooked up. spectators were greeted with a short video featuring elites with plasma weapons, Marines with assault rifles, Banshees, Pelicans, a Spartan, and more. This was truly the first iteration of Halo as it would be known, and with the newest trailer release and the reaction Bungie received, they had come to a decision on the future of the game. As it stood, the developers had become disengaged with the character they were controlling and the third-person view, and so made the final switch for Halo, officially becoming a first-person shooter. They had experience with first-person shooters, notably featuring the format in their Marathon games. However, in a decision that would set Halo apart from other games of the format at the time, including Marathon, vehicles would still be controlled in third person for ease of use and allowing the player to take in the full vista of their surroundings. On top of this major change on June 19th, Microsoft announced they had successfully acquired Bungie and the rights to Halo as an Xbox exclusive for $30 million. This came as quite the shock, as not only had Bungie only ever produced PC games, Halo now looked like it would never make it to PC despite previous promises. As part of the buyout, which overall seemed to be regarded as a positive by Bungie employees, they had to relocate to be closer to Microsoft itself. That meant picking up shop and heading from Chicago to Redmond, Washington. Things didn't go so well at first, as the small team of Bungie and the culture they had come to establish came in conflict with the large corporate structure of Microsoft. But, thanks to the acquisition, Bungie now had a stable financial backing and a deadline. Xbox was going to be released as the first console for Microsoft in the fall of 2001, with Halo being released at the same time. But by September of 2000, no serious progress had been made on the campaign. It remained a smorgasbord of concept art and an open world with no real goal. It wasn't until December of that year that crunch time really kicked in. During this period of development, Eric Troutman, writer for a large portion of the dialogue in the game, mentioned in his concept art book, The Art of Halo, quote, "Bungie's social culture and the rush to complete the game meant that team members provided input and feedback across disciplines. Aspects such as level design demanded collaboration between the designers creating the environments for players to explore and the artists who developed those environments' aesthetics," end quote. According to Paul Russell, "We made 90% of the game in 9 months. I worked that entire time, from January until early October 2001, 16 to 20 hours a day, 6 days a week, and from home on Sunday." The design and artwork produced in the development of Halo 1 at this time by core team members became a mainstay for the franchise. Robert McLeese, for his part, worked on human weapon design, establishing a look of functionality and a sense of relatability to modern weapons, even though the events of Halo are set roughly 5 centuries into the future. He also established the unmistakable look of the Flood, hideous abominations that the player encounters midway through the game. Shikai Wang was crucial for the artistic direction of the Covenant, drawing inspiration from sea creatures, emphasizing curvature and smoothness to the alien design, incorporating vast arrays of the colors blue, green, pink, and purple. He also helped with human military design, harking upon modern militaries, and thus defining the UNSC with green and black. The campaign, although early on was rumored to contain nearly 40 missions, was eventually cut down to a much more manageable 10, taking place in a variety of settings, including snow-filled caves, tight-quartered alien ships, dark swampy marshes, and ancient Forerunner structures. Bungie would also introduce various difficulties for the campaign. As a callback and tribute to Marathon, their original FPS, the Marathon symbol would be present on the shields, as well as one of the early design weapons that didn't make the cut for the final release of Halo, the human composite sword. These difficulties had obvious differences in enemy player health and damage, but dialogue would also change depending on the difficulty in certain cutscenes. For example, the ending of the game would be different if the final mission was completed on Legendary, shown with Sergeant Johnson, an iconic soldier in the campaign, hugging an elite as the Pillar of Autumn explodes. Within the story, the player would engage, for the first time, the Covenant, which included a myriad of different enemies, such as the elites and grunts, as well as the Flood, which added a horror aspect to the game and an extra layer of stress for the player. We even see a few technological relics left by the Forerunners, notably with the Sentinels and Guilty Spark. Considered today as classic enemies in the Halo franchise, it's impressive that the developers were able to establish so many of them early in the series. Weapons for Halo 1 would also become iconic. Jamie Griesmer was tasked with weapon balancing and influenced the design and functionality of most weapons, including the pistol, needler, sniper rifle, and shotgun. The wide breadth of weapons, with the added note that players could only carry two at the same time, but easily switch between them, an idea revolutionary in its day, created interesting choices and trade-offs that kept the gameplay dynamic. Marcus Lato, who had a wide variety of responsibilities with Bungie, worked on vehicles. His ideas produced not only fun-to-use vehicles such as the Warthog, Scorpion, and Banshee, but also unusable vehicles like the Pelican and Wraith. These added mobility and verticality to an already expansive world. They also provided the player the opportunity to take on enemies in new, refreshing ways in each playthrough. On top of all of this, the developers had found the time to introduce hidden secrets, also known as Easter eggs, within the campaign that the player could find. This included a musical score from Myth, a particularly chatty grunt, the Latin word for king, and nods to the developers themselves. These were the first in the franchise, but they certainly would not be the last. Halo 1 also came with multiplayer, albeit it was limited by the fact that Xbox Live as a service had not been released, and so users were only able to feasibly play with friends via split screen or LAN parties. Even still, the developers included in the multiplayer 6 core game types: Slayer, Oddball, Capture the Flag, King of the Hill, Race, and Juggernaut. Some of Halo 1's multiplayer maps included Battle Creek, Hang 'em High, Damnation, and Prisoner. The grinding development would finally come to a close with the release of the game on November 15th, 2001, as Halo shipped out with the launch of Xbox on the same day. Bungie's initial idea, which began roughly 4 years earlier, had come to fruition. The first Halo game ever was produced, and Bungie waited to witness its reception. With so much included in the game, but still many ideas put aside, it was unclear how the game would fare. They didn't have to hold their breath for long though, because they quickly learned it was a stunning success. What began as a modest team of just 8 or 9 people had by the end of development in 2001 brought it into a collaborative effort involving around 40 people, not including testers. This expansion was a testament to the dedication and passion of the team, who worked tirelessly to bring their vision to life. Their ideas forever changed the landscape of FPSs and the imaginations of players across the world. Halo 1 established itself as the Xbox game. From its immersive storytelling to its revolutionary multiplayer experience, Bungie had set the bar high for what a video game could achieve. Eric Nyland would also write Halo: The Fall of Reach as a backdrop for the game, expanding upon the Halo universe and setting the stage for a grand space opera with near limitless potential. With Bungie riding high, they would eventually take on their next project, Halo 2. I hope that this shed light on who helped create the foundations of this great franchise, because in my next video, I'll delve into the development and history of Halo 2, exploring how it built upon the foundations laid by its predecessor. I'll talk more about the team, and creative decisions and setbacks that led to one of the most memorable sequels to a game in history. So if you enjoyed this first installment of the series, I invite you to subscribe and stay tuned for more insights into the iconic franchise. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you next time.